Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Vinh and Ali Show, where it's a podcast, basically a podcast where we review books and try to extract some of the wisdom. And sometimes we just get stupid on this show, but we'd love to be able to introduce you to this particular episode, which is The Four Agreements. That's the book, and it's written by Don Miguel Ruiz. Is that how you say it, Ali? Ruiz?
I have no idea, but I'm sure how you said it is incorrect.
Okay, thank you, Ali. Thank you for the vouch of confidence. But to give you a bit of context on this book, I did a little bit of research. And look, Don was an apprentice under a shaman, which I thought was really interesting. The moment I heard that, I went, wow, I wonder how good this book is going to be. It's under a shaman. Anytime I hear shaman, I'm like, But it's a shaman under the knowledge of ancient Toltecs. And the ancient Toltecs are an indigenous Mexican culture of great warriors and artists who existed about 1,000 years ago. It was really cool knowing that I was going to read, and we were going to read a book that's based on the wisdom that came from great warriors and artists. That's kind of cool. It's kind of two very different perspectives, but they both held very similar beliefs.
Yep. I think it's interesting when we read literature that's based on older principles and philosophies, whether it's the Tao Te Ching or when you read about books that are based in Stoicism or Buddhism. And I think this is just another one that probably aligns in that line of kind of, call it alternative spiritual philosophy is maybe the terminology. And again, one of the things that I think is pretty cool about this as we dig into it is that it's simple. You know, there's four agreements. It's pretty practical. It's got pragmatism to it. There are bits that are maybe a little bit esoteric, but yeah, I think it's another one of those books. It's a pretty interesting like guidebook and framework that applies to modern day life.
And I just want to quickly say as well, thank you, Ali, for doing this podcast with me. It's had so many wonderful benefits. For one, this particular book, for example, the moment my wife Pei Wen saw me reading it, big shout out to my wife, and then she was like, hey, I want to read it too, and then she started reading it, and my wife and I have been having such good conversations back and forth about, hey, what do you think this part means? Or what do you think he means by this? And I'll bring it up later because there was a part of the book she brought up where she was like, hey, doesn't this contradict with this? And I was like, oh yeah, it kind of does. So I'll kind of bring that up, but it's just been great, man. It's been a pleasure doing this with you. So thanks for doing this with me.
Same goes back to you. And we always say it after every episode, I end up sending you a message or give you a call and I'm like, oh my God, I just learnt something from our own podcast. And so even for the tens of people out there that are listening to this, just know that we're also getting
it's more than 10. It's more than 10. And do you know how I know that? Do you know how I know that? Because, well, we just recently made the top 50 in the education category for the podcasts on Apple Podcasts. So there's surely there's more than 10 people listening to it. There's got to be at least 25. I mean, otherwise, how would we have made that list?
This is true. So I know that's a really cool little milestone. So big
absolutely
sound effects to overlay over that. And again, we don't do it for the accolades.
No, we don't. No, we don't. We genuinely, we do this for the sense of connection that, it brings. I think this makes me feel very connected to you. This allows us to do something that's aligned for us. And as we get better and as we grow and as we get older, I think it's so important to grow our minds and, bring into our lives different perspectives, different ways of thinking. And I tell you what, reading this book has definitely made me kinder. It's made me more understanding, more empathetic in so many ways. And let's get into it. Let's stop this kind of self-loving parade.
Nice
let's get into this. Let's
jump into it.
Beautiful. First thing that the book brings up is the whole idea of domestication. Now, I thought that was really interesting. I'll give people context for what I mean. In life, we're all domesticated. Essentially, we're punished for the bad actions and then we're rewarded for the good actions. And this happens from a very young age. And the problem with this whole thing is that we then get fixated on the rewards that come with the good actions. So if I do something good, I'll get rewarded, which later on in life becomes, if I work, I'll get paid, right? If I do this kind of work, I'll get paid. And then all we focus on is the money.
Get an A on the result, you get applauded.
You get money from the parents. I did. when I got an A, which was quite rare, but when I did, $100, right? So I got domesticated really young.
That's how you learn how to cheat on assignments very early on.
Well, I actually did cheat in university and got busted and had to resit the exam. But we'll talk about that later. But staying on topic,
at universities doesn't count as cheating.
We also kind of learned from the last podcast that if you copy from one person, it's plagiarism. But if you copy from 100 people, it's original. It's absolute genius. Completely changed my perspective on cheating.
See, we were early in the internet era in university as well, so we got the benefits of like copy and paste and getting to share an email assignment. The technology to be able to minimize cheating at that point wasn't that great. So.
Well, when I used to get busted, I used to think, I don't know how the teachers can tell. I have no idea how they can tell it's not my writing, and it's hilarious when you read it back now. well, look, what I'm trying to say here is that when it comes to domestication, the problem with domestication is that we get fixated on the reward. And if you're fixated on the reward in the example of working for money, is that you're just working for money. We no longer fall in love with the work. We no longer fall in love with the action. We are just addicted to the reward that comes. And that's kind of the big problem when it comes to domestication. Do you have any thoughts to add to that before I kind of keep talking?
Oh, for sure. I think it stood out as I just straight away thought about the kids. You know, we're both parents, and I'm like, wow, I know personally, I won't speak for you, but I'm like, geez,
no, you can speak for me.
I can speak. But even also just during that day, like the amount of times I told the kids, it's like, hey, you know, don't do that, or oh, good job, you know, well done on completing your piece of work. Like even just those little things we keep reiterating and reinforcing, whether it's positive or negative behaviors, but they're largely in alignment with our values and how we see the world. And that point that the book makes, where even when we look back on our lives, like there's so many things that are even subconscious that probably happened to us as kids, where people either punished us or rewarded us for certain behaviors that still stay true until today. And that's that concept of domesticating humans. I sort of battled with that because I really couldn't think of an alternative, even though the book kind of suggests things around, you know, challenging your beliefs and reviewing how you think about things. But it happens so often, both consciously and subconsciously, in just nearly every aspect of life. You know, whether it's social media, whether it's conversations with your friends, whether it's going to uni, whether it's working. Like our whole society is based on this do something, get rewarded for it framework. Even though then on the other hand, we preach, oh, stay in the moment, just take the action, do it for the love of it. I know in practice that sounds great, but very few people that I know are able to actually implement that.
I fall victim to this all the time. I mean, I think the one thing that I don't want our listeners to get wrong is just because Ali and I are able to articulate some of the lessons well, doesn't mean that we're able to live them out. I think it's very easy for people to be confused with us trying to extract wisdom to them thinking, oh, wow, these guys must do this all the time. No, hell no. I definitely focus on the reward a lot as well. And you're right. How can you be a part of society? How can you function as a part of society if you don't domesticate like the rest of society?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's not about not being domesticated. It's about being aware of the domestication that occurs and still being somewhat domesticated. However, because of your awareness of the domestication, you can kind of pull back the level of domestication.
Well, it's very hard for people that want to live an alternative to call it the domestication reward-based way of life. Like what happens? The system nearly weeds you out. People will say, oh, that person's a failure. They're lazy. They're crazy. They're whatever, right? If you don't fit the mold of call it the mainstream, you're taking a pretty significant risk. But then in some cases, you get rewarded for it if you go really on the outskirts of it. But even then, I think it's still largely based on the reward system. Even you think about us at the top of this episode, we're celebrating making the charts, right? Like the whole time. Even we're like, look, we don't care what happens. If anyone listens, we just love doing this thing. But we're conditioned to the reward system because once we saw ourselves going up the charts, we shared it and we put it out there. Like, so as you said there, we're not on any high horse acting like we're above the current system, but I think it is a very interesting concept when you start thinking yourself as a human being that's been largely domesticated. Like, it's quite confronting, isn't it? When you read that, you read it deeply, it's like, oh yeah, wow. Not only am I domesticated, but I'm also then probably domesticating others.
Well, we're domesticating our kids. I mean, that's the one you started with, right? And it made me think about the way that I'm domesticating Xander. You know, it just made me more conscious of it, because when we're young, those who domesticate us are those, you know, our parents, uncles, aunties, teachers, etc. And the crazy thing is, as you get older, maybe your parents don't domesticate you anymore, but you're so domesticated that you domesticate yourself. And when I read that part of the book, I went, wow, that's so crazy that it's such a huge part of our lives that we no longer need other people to domesticate us. We domesticate ourselves.
It's inbuilt. Yeah.
It's inbuilt.
Chantal and I, we were talking about this last night, and we were talking about the kids around, like what's the call it correct or right approach? Because there's one argument that says, oh, we'll just let the kids be who they're meant to be and let them be free. But then the counter argument that Chantal was saying is, yeah, but there's a very good chance they could just become a wildling and like suffer because of that. Because then, you know, if you let say behaviors, for example, get too out of control, the risk is that, well, it might be harder to fit in at school. It might be harder to make friends. It might be harder to find, you know, comfort and feeling that sense of belonging and fitting in. And then I'm sort of on the other end where I'm like, you know, just let's see how it plays out. and there's no right, well, there's probably a right or wrong answer. I won't say that there's no right or wrong answer.
I don't think there is,
it can go both ways. But then we've seen it when you go the other way, like the full free spirit model. And that's probably got some pretty inherent risks there too, that can lead to substance abuse or whatever, you know, some other alternative issues where there isn't enough structure or discipline or domestication. So who knows, maybe the domesticated approach, we've collectively all come to that because it's an approach that does work. Like if we didn't have it, would we just all be, you know, animals?
Vikings.
Yeah. Like going back to the caveman style of living where it was just survival and I don't like you, so I'm just going to punch you in the face. And maybe the domestication does play a positive role too.
The answer we always come back to is the answer is both.
It's both.
You know, it's
on this one. I think we have to go both.
Well, you have to go both because if you're not domesticated at all, for example, let's take an example of a dog, for example. So we don't have to. It doesn't have to be so personal. But when you look at a dog, if a dog's not domesticated, it can't live together with humans in a harmonious way. I'm not going to take in a dog that's not domesticated. I'm not going to bring up a wolf. As much as I love them, I'm not going to have a wolf in my backyard because at any moment it could eat my child. It could eat Xander, right? So to me, whereas I have my Labradoodle because, man, I trust him, he's domesticated. But, you know, he's still got a bit of wild in him. The fact that he does go a little bit crazy every now and then if we don't take him for a walk. You know, so there's a nice balance in my Labradoodle where he's still got teeth that can kill you, but he doesn't. Whereas I feel like don't lose the part of you that's free. Don't lose that inner child. However, you've got to learn the rules of the game too, so you can play effectively within the game. But then you've got to be able to. But then you've got to be able to unplug from the game too. I think it's. I think you describe it way more eloquently than I can. It's just domesticated, learn how to play the game, but don't always play the game.
If there is a positive spin to it and maybe a practical takeaway from domestication, it would be potentially an opportunity for reflection where we can look at our lives and be like, all right, well, are there aspects where we're domesticated? And when I'm thinking of the word domesticated, I'm thinking like controlled or predefined or very strongly held beliefs that maybe need to be challenged a little bit. So that could be the opportunity there. Like if you do feel like you're domesticated or you're domesticating others, maybe it's just an opportunity just for awareness to be like, okay, well, there are aspects of this that are great, that work in this structure, and then there's aspects that have just been forced on me, whether it was at a young age or because of my culture, my society, and maybe I do need to, what's the opposite end of that? What's the alternative view to whatever it is that I believe? And I think that provides a more holistic picture and also allows you to understand the world and maybe others a little bit better.
Well, I mean, you explaining awareness, I mean, that's one of the 4 ways that the author said one of the 4 ways in which we can undomesticate ourselves or keep ourselves from being too domesticated. And awareness is definitely one of them. The author has this line where he says, 95% of the beliefs we have stored in our minds are nothing but lies, and we suffer because we believe in the lies. And I think what he's referring to there is the lies are the rules in which we are domesticated with, and those rules are based on what? They're just lies in the sense that they may not even be true, and generally they're not true. And what he says here is that he relates that into, if we believe in these lies, then we're just living in a bad dream. Yep. And that the domestication can just be a really bad dream that we've created for ourselves, and also that others have created for us. And then the 4 ways in which he said we can wake up from this bad dream. The first one, like you mentioned, is awareness. You must be aware that you're living in this dream, or this dream is created by a series of beliefs, and you've got to understand that it's an illusion. And the moment you understand it's an illusion, that awareness helps you, it helps break the illusion apart. The second one that he says is forgiveness. Do you remember much on this part? I mean, I've taken a few notes, but he says forgiveness. And the reason he says forgiveness breaks away the illusion is because once you accept the consequences of the illusions and how these illusions impact you and those around you, you can be more forgiving of it, because it happens to everyone. It's not just you. It's not just your parents doing it to you, not your teachers or your environment doing it to you. This happens to everyone. And he allows us to be more forgiving. So I thought that was really interesting, and if you're more forgiving, the other two was action. Mm-hmm. And so it was awareness, forgiveness, action, and actually it was just 3. Yep. So it was those 3 things. And then you've got to take action. You now need to dissolve this dream and shape it into a dream that you actually want, into a reality that you actually want to live in. So if you become more aware, if you forgive more, because now you understand if someone does something terrible, it's just because they're in a bad dream. They're in a bad dream that's caused them to act in that certain way. And if you become more forgiving and you take action in forming new beliefs, you can shape your own dream. And that's the forgiveness part is what really, I think, if I keep this front of mind, it will help make me a more kind person. Because if you see someone who does something really bad, it could be because that they've just been domesticated in a very bad way. They've got a set of really bad beliefs. Again, let's go back to the dog example, right? A type of dog that gets a lot of hate is the pit bull. But I've got a friend who's got a dog who's a pit bull, and she's the sweetest dog ever, right? And it's just that dog has had a bad environment. It's been domesticated in a terrible way that has caused them to be a terrible dog. And to me, again, using the dog example, is such a great example of someone being or an animal being domesticated terribly. So me understanding that now, I when I see something negative happen, I'm like, oh man, instead of just getting angry at that person, go, why would people do that? You just have that little bit of empathy where you go, wow, maybe they had a really terrible upbringing. Maybe they had really bad influences and living in this terrible illusion of a life, and you can forgive it more easily.
It made me think about, remember when we were in kids in primary school and somebody would tease you, and you'd be like, what was the saying?
Yeah.
So am I, or what was the saying? It was like
someone says something and then they go, but you are
mirror
too.
It back at them.
Yeah. No, I'm not. You are.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, it's along those lines.
or the classic one is, so's your face. That's a classic one too.
Yes,
Yeah.
but just mirroring that back, I think it's a really cool practical way that if you cop something negative that you don't like, just be like, yeah, so what? That's on you. And I really love that concept in this book when they talk about negative comments or negative interactions, especially from other people, that you don't take it personal.
That's one of the agreements.
That you just let it slide. And it ties in with the concept of forgiveness, I think, really beautifully, because forgiveness is ultimately about letting go. And at the end of the day, we all know it. If you're holding a grudge or if you're angry at somebody, you're the one that ultimately carries that weight. That other person might have moved on. They're now doing whatever they're doing, causing other people grief, but they're not holding the weight of upsetting you. They might not even know that they have upset you. So if you're holding that pain or that anger, again, forgiveness is a pretty cool antidote to just get that closure, and then you can move on. And to me, it's really, well, we've spoken about these topics a few times. It's about detachment. It's about letting go. It's about moving on. It's about turning a negative into a positive, seeing it from a different perspective. Like, I think there's some really cool practical applications to this that you can utilize in so many different aspects. Like, it's in heaps of books, right, where they talk about the example that the boss yells at the employee, or you have a fight with your parents, but then you realize what's actually going on behind the scenes that you couldn't actually see. And then, it makes sense. It's like, okay, now I get why that person did that. But it's very easy just to take one interaction and create our own narrative around that, and for it to cause a lot of hurt.
Well, let's dive into that agreement even more, so we can have a deeper understanding of being more forgiving, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's just like what you said. If you don't take things personally, you learn that it's not all about you. Yeah. Because for you to take something personally indicates that you think everything is about you. For example, I'll give you an example that happened to Pei Wen and I. One morning, I got up in the morning, and Pei Wen was up most of the night. And I remember her coming into the room, and she just said, "Oh my God, I couldn't sleep all night, and I just feel really tired." And then she just made a remark about how tired she felt. And then I thought that was a go at me. I mean, I don't even know why, but I just thought that was a go at me because I didn't go and look after Xander, and then she went. Like, she didn't say it with any negative tone, but I went, and I just got really upset. And when I read this book, and then she was like, "Why are you even getting upset? I don't even understand what's wrong with you." And after reading this, and I reflected, and I went, wow, that was because that morning I felt really stressed because I had a lot of work to do. And then her saying that, I immediately thought it was about me, but it had nothing to do with me. And that was a classic example of me thinking that everything in life is to do with me. And it was such a great example, and I was so glad it happened in the way that it did, because it made me reflect so deeply on this. And since understanding this, there's been a couple of other examples where things have happened, and I just thought, actually, this is not about me. Maybe that person's going through a bad day. Maybe something terrible has happened to that person that morning. Maybe it's not about me at all. And this is where it got a bit contradicting, because this is the thing that Pei Wen brought up with me. She said that if you always think that it's not about you and that it's about the other person, doesn't that end up causing you to become an egotistical wanker? Because, like, someone can say to you, "Hey, Ali, you're being really mean." You can go, "Hey, mate, it's not about me. You're going through something pretty bad, aren't you? Do you feel like a bit of a wanker today?"
You're being mean.
Maybe it's
just
you.
Mimicking. You just mimic whatever they say.
Like, isn't that,
go and tip over your cup of water or whatever it is, and they're like, "Hey, why'd you do that?" You did that.
Well, you did that. Isn't it, like, to me, it's the greatest out for just being the biggest jerk ever, right? And like, you got to be careful with that, because if someone says, "Hey, you got something green in your teeth," and you go, "Hey, is it because you've got something green in your teeth?" It doesn't even make sense. So to me, you've got to be very careful with these types of lessons. And this is how I thought of it, and I would love to hear your opinion. To me, this just helps us see the other side of the coin. Whereas generally we only see one side of the coin. We only see the side that represents our world. What this lesson does is it reveals to us there's another side to the coin. And it doesn't mean that our side of the coin doesn't exist. It doesn't mean only the other side of the coin exists. It means now we can see the full picture. So part of it is our fault, but also part of it is their fault, or not even fault. Part of it is because of what we're going through, and part of it is because of what they're going through. So you don't take all the weight and the blame. You've got to understand that anything that happens, there's two sides to the coin, and this helps us see the other side clearly.
Yep, for sure. I think a lot of it's around intention as well. Say, for example, if you're just being yourself and then you get attacked for that, I think there's really good practical application in this lesson, that then it's probably likely just the other person, because you're just being yourself and you can't really change that. Now, you might be a jerk, but that's on you to then develop and evolve. But I think the concept still works and applies. Like say, for example, we'll use a controversial one, but Donald Trump, right? In his head, he wouldn't think he's unlikable or that he's not a nice person. But then there's probably 50% of America that maybe don't think that he's very likable and they wouldn't want to be friends with him. And then maybe there's another 50% that really like him or align with him, right? Like, but at the end of the day, he's just being him, right? There's probably never been a greater example of somebody just being themselves on a massive global scale. Now, whatever the result is from that, it is what it is. But yeah, there's no real binary rule, right? Like, how do you, at what point can you say categorically that this is good or bad? You might not align with it, or you might not believe in that person or in that behavior, but it's very hard, right? And I think generally we associate with people that we align with, that have similar values and beliefs to us. And this was actually in a different book. And it spoke about the concept of, it was one of Austin Kleon's books, where we read his book, Steal Like an Artist, in the last episodes. He's got another book called Keep Going. And one of the lines is, don't always hang out with people who are like-minded, hang out with people that are like-hearted. And that's another thing that we also do. So that way you can also see people with different perspectives and different viewpoints, but you can still do your best to, say, if you align with kindness, generosity, humor, whatever it is, you can go into different ecosystems where you can align with those people. Now, I went a little bit off track there, but I think that going back to the original point of, call it mirroring and reflection, it's a great toolkit. For example, if you do feel like you're on the wrong end of the stick, or you're being bullied, or you're being treated unfairly by an individual. And there's probably two components to that. One is that somebody that you want to keep associating with if they're not accepting you for who you are and you're getting belittled or berated by that person? A, do you need to maybe change that relationship? But B, is there another reason why that person's behaving like that and treating you in that manner that you can't see? And is it worth asking the question and exploring that a little bit more if that relationship does mean something to you? But it's true though, right? Like, we do it all the time. Like, I know if I'm feeling a certain way, that can quite often reflect on other people. Like, we're so mood and emotion based. You can't control it. Like, some days you're just happy and you're a joy to be around. Other days you've got a darker energy, and it's probably best if people avoid you on those days. Like the day that you were explaining there, you're probably just feeling a little bit tired. The energy wasn't there, and something small,
I know,
got into that. Like, it happens all the time. Like, a couple of weeks ago, I woke up just flat, and then you just see that energy then translates into the kids and into your interactions with your partner, with your friends. And again, it was actually one of our other episodes in Sapiens when we spoke about energy. I'm like, yes, you've got to consciously look at working on that energy. And I think energy is another really good thing that relates to this, because if you can build up that energy, the odds of potentially treating people better is likely going to be higher as well.
And I think as well, when you've got more energy, what I meant to say was when you don't take things personally, you're conserving your energy as well. Because when you take things personally, you expel so much energy feeling that emotion and getting frustrated. And hey, by the way, I love that example of, don't just spend time with like-minded people, spend time with like-hearted people. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Getting those different perspectives, that's why we are doing this podcast. That's why we're reading, is that every time we read, we get a different perspective from a different author that allows us to think and look at things in a different way. And this one is just such a great example of that, because I feel so much better now when these small negative moments happen in my life. Same thing. I could give you another really classic example that tends to happen quite often in South Australia, but we've got a lot of terrible drivers here, and people kind of use the horn a lot in South Australia. We're known for just, road rage. And we were going one night to see this awesome light show, and we were all excited in the car, and we're driving, and Xander's in the back, all excited. Peiwen's pumped. I'm filming the whole thing, doing a little family vlog, and this car just kind of swerves out of the way, drives, beeps at everyone. And very quickly, this lesson applied. It just made me think, you know what? It's not personal. They did give not just me, but everyone the finger. But it's not personal. Maybe that person, man, maybe they just, again, had maybe the domesticated in such a bad way. And it's not even about me, because they don't know me. They don't know who I am. They have no idea. They don't even know what I sound like. They probably didn't even see me. And just having this as a shield just protected me from feeling angry, protected me from wasting any energy. It was brilliant, dude. I mean, I'm benefiting from this so much already. It's been awesome.
Yep. I think just picking your battles, because you learn, especially interactions that involve conflict. Right, like I'm thinking back to an example. We were in, my little one loves KFC as a sometimes treat. Now we'll say sometimes because it shouldn't happen too regularly, and I don't want to put myself under the bus in case his mum listens to it. But after soccer, sometimes he'll be like, "Look, can we stop at KFC, get a couple of bits of chicken?" Right? He loves that. We're sitting in the drive-thru at our local KFC, and we're just in the lane. And there's lockdowns and stuff happening. So you can, even in shopping centers, you can feel that people are agitated. There's this energy that's a little bit more aggravated. And this guy went behind the car, had his trolley, and bumped it into the car and was flipping out. Now, if you go back to the domesticated rule, it's pretty clear that there was something going on. And my little one's in the car, and he's like, "Oh, what's going on? Why is that man yelling, and why did he hit the trolley with the car?" And it's like, look, then the response was, "Look, maybe that man just isn't feeling that kind today, or there's something going on." And it could have been a really easy opportunity. If I think about myself 5-10 years ago, it would have been very easy to just get into a conflict with that person and be like, "What the hell's going on?" You get agitated, right? When you feel like something that didn't really have justice there. We were just innocently sitting in the car, and this person just hit the trolley into the car and started flipping out, right? There was nothing provoked there. But then you have this interaction, you got the kid in the car. But it was just another example there of just letting it go and trying to practice that as much as possible. Because the flip side to that interaction could have just been a pretty messy situation. And we see that all the time. Very rarely do I've got a couple of friends that really admit to road rage. And I'm like, well, what good can happen from that? There's only bad things. You can't win a road rage argument. It's not like you get an award and it's yes, it's like a boxing match where you get a title for being the most road ragiest.
Can you imagine if there was? That would be the funniest awards show ever. Barry would get on stage and be so bloody angry. He'd just get on stage. Oh, that would be hilarious.
To me, road rage is one of the most interesting ones. Where it's what's the programming to get that angry while driving to a location? I can't comprehend it.
But what it also shows is how
fights and.
But look, dude, I've seen people get out of their cars and I think, I don't know what causes it, but I surely it's to do with emotional management. And again, if people take things personally, that's probably why. If two people are taking things personally, I just beeped you because I'm like, hey, it's a green light. But if you took it personally and went, what the hell? It just turned green. And you get out of the car and you get upset, and then you take it personally, then I take it personally, and then boom, a volcano erupts, right? So I think it's because people take things too personally. That's probably why that happens. Let me give you another example. I know we're overdoing the examples here, but it just made me think of this one moment in a chocolate shop.
Just do a whole episode of examples.
Yeah, just examples. Yeah, just and only examples on this topic.
Happened. And then this happened. Yeah. So guys, just strap yourself in. We've got about 90 minutes left of just examples of things.
Yeah, exactly. 23 examples of how this applies. No, but seriously, I was at a chocolate shop with my wife and my son, and we're lining up. And again, this is during pandemic times. And we've got our masks on. Everyone's got their masks on, and we were just lining up. And then this old man turns around and then just yells at us and just he says, "Oh, get back, get further back." And, admittedly, we were a little bit close. Maybe we went 1.5 meters away. We were 1 meter away. But he just reacted really negatively towards Pei Wen, Xander, and I. I immediately took that personally, man. This is where my mind went. I bet that man thinks just because we're Asian, we have the coronavirus. Like, I went way negative because that's what I saw in the news about, people of the Asian descent and, being beat up and everything. And I just went immediately there. So in reflecting on this lesson, it made me view that interaction that we had with so much more compassion, because now I'm thinking, what happens if that man's partner passed away because of COVID? It's got nothing to do with me being bloody Asian. It's got nothing to do with, but I just took it so personally. I took it personally to the point where deeply he was insulting me as my culture and my race. Why the hell did I go there so quickly? And that experience stayed in my head to the point where I was able to recall it when you were talking about your experience. But because this lesson and this perspective is now in my mind, this lesson is in my head, I'm able to let that terrible experience go now. What if his best mate passed away because of COVID? And what if he's just scared for his own life, that he doesn't want to get COVID? Because of the media showing him all these things, he's scared to get it, the poor soul. So all of a sudden now, this has allowed me to look back upon experiences and let go of these little angry moments that I'm kind of holding onto in the back of my head. Again, this is powerful, man. This is damn.
True.
Do you have another 20 examples we can go through?
Oh, there's so many. It applies
really, there
to
is
essentially any negative interaction, because you've
absolutely.
Also got I think we've spoken about it before. You've got to think about, call it negative interactions or things that cause us to get angry. They're very relative to us. Like your example there, you went to a space that makes sense, but it's not that far outside of the realm given what's going on there. But again, how does that help you or serve you in that situation? Right. And I think that's the other thing as well. Like when we think about society, and we see so much of it, especially at the moment, when you're looking at groups, minorities, groups that are underrepresented, groups that are fighting for equality across the spectrum. Like we've seen so much of that over, say, at least the last 10, 20 years, where that's what everyone wants. Everyone wants to be respected. Everyone wants to feel equal. They want to be themselves. There's a real hunger for that. And it's really tough, I think, when you're holding on to the pain that comes from those negative interactions or being marginalized or treated slightly differently. And we see that a lot of the time it ends up in conflict, right? Like whether it's protests or it's violence or it's anger. And sometimes maybe you do need that energy for progress. But I think to really get that freedom, there has to be another level to it. Like even when you look back to the leaders that have enacted a lot of change, whether it's Martin Luther King or Mahatma Gandhi, they used passiveness and inclusion and calmness to get a lot of progress as well. So I wonder in this situation around using that lesson of not taking things too personally. But then I think about watching the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, and he was just completely driven by taking everything personally. He would make up stories to take things personally to inspire action. So again, maybe there's two sides to this, right? Like sometimes you can use the chip on the shoulder, call it, for massive action, and that can be really powerful. But then at other times, maybe it's just better just to let things go if they're not going to help you or serve you.
It's interesting, the people who do take it personally and can use it as a fuel source, like Michael Jordan. I think you just have to reflect upon, is it the right fuel source for you? I often hear some people say this, and especially in the entrepreneurial community, is that, you know, I want people to tell me I can't do it, because then I'll show them.
Oh.
And to me, sure, I think that's definitely one fuel source. But then the other fuel source is people who are encouraging, hey, you can do it. And I mean, why go for that kind of harsh fuel source? But I mean, sometimes that's the only fuel source that's available to you. And then you have to use that fuel source. But to me, you just got to keep in mind that there may be other more eco-friendly fuel sources as opposed to using demons.
I would have to admit that 95% of my life has been fueled by the first one. It's the you can't do it. You'll never be able to do it. I love the chip on the shoulder. Like, it's been such a driver for that underdog mentality. But you're right. Like, it also comes with costs as well. It comes with costs because you can get ruthlessly focused on the objective. You can get very competitive.
Yeah.
You can miss smelling the roses by just getting so relentlessly honed in on one thing, or to try to prove one person wrong. I think you're right. I don't think it's that sustainable.
Well, look, don't take anything personally. One of the 4 agreements, the whole idea of this one, I guess, is to help protect you from negative and just kind of blatant, harsh comments and just blatant negativity. Whereas, you know, it's not, sometimes you do have to take things personally, right? To me, when I seek feedback and then my mentors tell me, hey, Vin, you should stop doing some of these things because it can impact you negatively in your life. You know, imagine me just again saying, no, that's not me, that's you. So to me, you've got to take this and understand that this is, again, you've been given a toolkit, and there are times to use the tools and there are some times you don't use the tools. I think it's funny now reading the lessons. I don't look at them as, oh, I've got a hammer, everything's a nail. I just have learned that, oh, cool, I'm acquiring a new tool. So when this situation comes up, I can look at my selection of tools and think to myself, which one should I use for this particular situation? And the more tools we acquire, the more we can eloquently work our way through difficult situations.
For sure.
Well, let's jump to the first agreement then. The first agreement, and then let me give you all context as well. What the author is saying here is that if we follow these 4 particular agreements, we are going to be able to live a more free life. And that's what we're all trying to achieve, I believe, to some degree. And the first agreement that he mentions is be impeccable with your word. Do you want to talk a little bit about that first agreement, and then I can chime in as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's pretty much what the sentence states, right?
No, there's more to it, Ali.
You're right. But I think it's around the concept that, and I love that there's a line that we create our world essentially with our words and the way that we communicate. You know, so if we assume that we're living a movie or we're living our own video game or a dream, as the author refers to it, so much of that is based on our word and the way that we use our word, whether it's how we communicate our beliefs, how we communicate our actions, the promises that we make, the things that we say, how we say them. And it's a pretty big reminder that how powerful that really is. Like, even when people speak about integrity or their trust, or I think when we think back to the people that we think that are really good people, we'll generally say, like what's one of the best compliments you get? They stuck to their word, or they said what they were going to do. And I think, personally, I think this is one of the hardest agreements to live by.
Absolutely.
I think it's so tricky to just be, and again, the author says this, it's like with all of these agreements, it's going to be very hard to be perfect at them. Yeah, you can only do your best. You can only keep trying to improve at it. And I think this is one where, like, to be just 100% open and honest all the time, or to even deliver on every single thing that you say that you're going to do, this is another one that's pretty confronting. Probably out of all of the agreements, this one makes me look back on it the most. Just where it's like, oh yeah, it's like, did you deliver on that promise? Did you actually do what you said you were going to do? When are times that you've said something, but you haven't actually done it? And it was pretty interesting.
This one really hit home for me when the author described it in this way. When the author said that your words have powers like a curse, like a spell. And the example he gave, I thought, was really powerful because I could relate to it because, my cousin and my wife, sometimes I see this happen to them. Where, let's take example, a woman takes an hour to get ready to make herself look really beautiful. And then she goes out with her friends, and then one of her friends says, "Oh my God, are you okay? You look really tired." And the moment that person says those words, the person who receives that no longer feels beautiful and feels ugly. Even though they spent an hour making themselves, look beautiful, and even themselves before that, just moments ago, felt beautiful because they put so much effort into the way they look. And when the author said that, I was like, wow, I've seen that happen to my cousin. I've seen that happen to my wife. And then it made me think, when he used the word curse, it just made me go, oh, far out. It means curses are real. We tend to think of curses and spells to be something that, that's, something from the medieval times when they believed in witches. But no, curses are actually real. Someone can say something to you, and immediately, no matter how good you felt a moment ago, once they say a sequence of words delivered in a certain way, it can immediately make you feel like crap. And that just made me so conscious of, am I going through my day now cursing people? Am I doing evil magic or good magic? Am I the I can't remember the evil mage in Lord of the Rings, but am I that evil one, or am I Gandalf? It's again, are you doing good magic or bad magic? And you have the power to brighten someone's day. You have the power to see someone and go, hey, you look gorgeous today. Hey, you look great. And I'm not used to doing that, but it's made me more conscious of just finding opportunities where I sincerely mean what I say, and then say it to the person. Just go, hey, I really love your outfit today. It looks great. And just knowing that you have that power to put a spell on someone and make them feel good for the next 20 minutes. I just thought, wow, we're all mages, we're all wizards. We all have the ability to do good magic or bad magic. I thought that was fantastic. I loved it.
For sure. I love the word that you used there was sincerely, because I think it can go the other way.
Oh yeah.
Where we just say things because we know the other person wants to hear it.
But we know people who do that, because when they give you the compliment, it's not real, and it's not real, but they're using it as a tactic to build rapport so that you will buy the thing they're selling. There are situations where that's why you've got to build it as a habit when it's something authentic,
Yeah. And I think this one relates to business a lot, because if you think about the worlds that we operate in, whether it's entrepreneurship or thought leadership, how much of what we do is selling a dream, right? Like it is about, like, even I think about when we're mapping out a strategy or the vision for the business, so much of it's in the imaginary, and you're going for things that haven't been done before, or you're going for these goals or these objectives, and then you're trying to inspire people. And you like, I think I found myself doing it as well. Sometimes you're saying things that you hope you can live up to, but you don't actually know whether you can or not. And it really got me thinking about this. And it's one of the things that I've started doing as well, just on a practical with a practical sort of application is retrospectively looking whether I can balance the ledger. So if I feel internally that there were certain things that I've said in the past or that I've promised, going actually back on that and being like, all right, even if it's a year, 3 years, 5 years later, is there a way to rebalance that somewhat, or at least make an attempt to do it in those cases? Because I know for a fact that there's been instances like that, especially in the business journey, where you say things, right? It's like, oh yeah, we'll do this together. Once we hit this, we'll do this. And sometimes it doesn't really play out, but then maybe it does later on, like that result for that stuff. But it can happen. And I think that's something that I haven't seen, especially many businesses do, where it's like retrospectively rewarding people that played a key role. I think we're very good at rewarding them in the moment, rewarding them to acquire them and acquire services. But once it's sort of done and dusted, it's very common in the business world just to be like, oh yeah, that was back in the day. Don't worry about it. It doesn't really count. We're here now. So I think this is something that really stuck by, and just made some notes around that when we were reading this. It's like, just make, the note that I wrote was, see if you can balance the ledger as much as possible. And whether that's karma or that, but I think it's a lot of that's based on the word and being impeccable with it as much as you can. It's probably never going to be perfect, but I think that's just an internal objective there. It's like, all right, we'll try to match that up as much as possible.
That's a really beautiful kind of note you took down. That's awesome. Just making me reflect as well. And when you think about the business world, I think of one common thing that I used to do that, I'm going to try to not do anymore, because I guess, again, be impeccable with your word. And it's that line I normally say after I see someone I haven't seen in a long time, especially in the business realm, where you say, oh, hey, let's catch up soon for a coffee, hey? Like, I don't actually, I just say that as this terrible, it's like I don't want to say goodbye to them. And then I say that, and they're like, oh yeah, let's do it. And I'm like, oh no, I didn't actually want to do it. No. So to me, it's, I think being impeccable with your word it's the habit of saying things that you mean. And again, it's not about being mean. It's just, if you mean to have a coffee with that person, then say it. Don't just say these things because some people might take it personally and go, oh yeah, well, let's do it. And I remember one person to me, when I said to them, and this is how I learned the lesson as well, quite dramatically, as I said, oh, hey, let's have a coffee. And he says, you don't want to have coffee with me, so don't say that. And I was like, oh.
Now I don't.
Damn it. Yeah. Okay,
actually,
yeah,
now I do.
Now
I've got FOMO. I really want to have the coffee.
No, that didn't happen. I was like, now I double don't want to. But it's just one of those things where, like you said, it's very difficult to live by, but it's a powerful one to live by, because if you're more impeccable with your word, like you said, that person kept to their word. I think that is, wow. It's a tough one to be doing consistently, but if you can just kind of try your best at it, I think that's going to still be you living your best life. If you just try your best, right?
Here's a question.
Can you wait, just before that, can you imagine there was a person that actually existed who, since the moment they were born to the moment they die, they were just impeccable with their word? What a legend that person would be, hey? Bloody hell.
Sure, I think it also depends on how many words you put out there, because you probably could do it if you don't actually
say much.
Yeah,
or say much.
There probably are people there. Like, I think there's probably a balance there. I was listening to a comedian talk. I can't remember what show it was. And they were talking about how when they grew up through the ranks, all the different like promises they made, to like aunties and uncles. They're like, oh, when I make it big, I'm going to buy you a house. I'm going to do all these. And then this comedian ended up making it pretty big.
Oh no.
And then all these people started coming out, and he's like, geez, if I had to cash in like on all of those promises, I would have needed like $4.5 billion that I just didn't have. He was saying he had success. He's like, yeah, I had like 800 grand or like 900 grand, but I could not deliver on all of these promises. But it just got me thinking on that, is that maybe there's some things that you say that are maybe throwaway lines. Like at what point does that, because I'm thinking about it more as contracts nearly. Like when you say something about delivering on them, but obviously for the most part, it's going to be pretty hard to deliver on all of it.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's also remembering it all. Like I think that's the other thing that I think about is it's probably important on the other side is that if people have promised you something and you feel like you didn't get it, I think it's also important to remind that person that you feel that there's something owing there on the table and being open about it. And then seeing if there is an opportunity. At least that way the other person has the opportunity to then correct that rather than you walking around feeling animosity towards that person. That, oh, they said they were going to do this, but they didn't. Like who knows, Vin? You might have like 1,000 people out there just waiting at the cafe for a coffee. And you're like, yeah, like I know Vince is going to get back to me. It's been like 6 months, but surely. The question I was going to ask you is when you commit to something that is a little bit in advance, but then it gets to the time and you don't want to do it, right? What do you do in that situation?
Just got to do it. If I've already committed to it, yeah. I mean, if I've already committed to it, it's in my diary. I just, you got to do it. And I will admit there are times when I commit to things and I'm like, oh, I don't really want to do this. But the thing is, once it's in your diary, it's a promise. They've accepted the invite. You've accepted the invite. And you're like, I'm in. I got to do it. So then you just got to do it. Why? What do you do?
I try to do it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I still do it. So I've got one point on you with that.
So you're a better human. So do you do it? Like, would that be? Well, what would you say your cancellation rate would be, or rescheduling rate?
Not that high. I don't. I mean, having said that, I cancelled you on last week. But to me, I only do it with people I don't care about. That's all. So, I mean, and I care about a lot of people, so it says a lot, me cancelling on you last week.
I think your cancellation rate with me is about 60%. So
no, it's not. No, it's not, mate. It's more. Yeah. It's way more than that.
I turn up all the time.
No, you don't. We're
Sometimes
pretty
I
much
just sit here. I just sit here with this setup for like 2 hours. And yeah, he's coming, guys. Just hold on. Just give him a minute. Then I'll look out the window sad. And a little tear just comes down. Just kind of comes down. And then every now and then that's bloody I used to be terrible. Like look to the point where we'd have meetings and like one of my guys, like John, he called me out one day and he's like, mate, if you say you're going to do something, just do it. Like stop booking these things in and then cancelling last minute. And this is probably maybe 3-4 years ago where I got pretty bad with it because I don't know, there was something there where the calendar invite, when I'd look at it on the day and I wasn't feeling the vibes, it was nearly like a physical reaction where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this.
Do you know what the problem there? The problem there for me, I don't know if this is true for you, but the problem there is because I've only just recently in the last 12 months learned how to say no properly. I've only just recently started to value my own time with my family. It's I have my strategies and I have certain lines that I use to tell people why I'm saying no to them. And we've talked about this before, is that I say to them, look, if I say yes to you, I'm saying no to my family and my son. And then that's why I'm saying no to you. But even though I have that line that I can go to, I still feel bad because I know what it's like when people want to spend time with you and they want to just get a little inspiration from you. And to me, I've only just started to go, you know what? I'm actually not responsible for you. I'm just not. I'm responsible for my wife. I'm responsible for my son. I'm responsible for my family. I'm responsible to my friends. I do have responsibilities, but to this stranger who's asking me for my time, I don't have to give it if I don't have it. Whereas before I'd work so hard to go. And then when I do it, I become, like you're just like, oh, you do it, but you're begrudgingly doing it. So to me, I think that makes me less compassionate saying yes all the time. It makes me less generous if I say yes in those instances. You've just got to learn how to say no more.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely an area to focus and improve for me. I think that's a big takeaway from this one?
Well, to really wrap up, be impeccable with your word. The big takeaway I take from this, Ali, is that my words are spells that I can put on people. I mean, heck, I've even wrote a whole keynote module and I've delivered it last week virtually for a client where I do a piece of magic where it's a little bit of hypnosis, which is quite fun. And then you make this person lose their ability to read and it's super funny. And to me, I'm like, hey, this is how magicians can use a spell to cause someone to, lose their ability to read properly. And I go, these spells are fun and entertaining.
Does it work?
Well, hypnosis is a form of compliance. So it wouldn't be entertaining doing it with you right now. Okay. Let's just say it'll be more entertaining if I did it with someone who didn't know what I was about to do.
Yeah, okay.
But when you do it, it's incredibly fun and you show them that, hey, this is a great and positive spell. Whereas I could do it in a way that's a negative spell. And I do that demonstration to highlight to the audience the power of the things that you say to other people. And that's what I do now is that each day, as I start my day, I think, what are the good and wonderful spells that I can cast on those around me? And that's what I really take upon it. And I try not to cast any, negative spells, curses that cause people to have a terrible day. That's the big thing I take away from this. And it sounds like the one you're taking from it is more of a professional point of view, right? It's kind of a...
Yeah, well, mine's probably more around just committing to it a little bit more.
Following through, right?
Yeah, it's more the discipline. Like, I remember doing this a couple of years ago after John called me out, and because of journal and keep notes, I would highlight in red when I felt that I wasn't aligned or true with that word. So, and then I'd look back over a month and the goal would be to have like less than 5 instances of that were red highlights, whether it was a negative interaction, whether it was negative like thinking, call it, or not really aligning with, like I used to use the word like truth, or purity. Like, was that pure or true, the intention or the action that then happened? And I think that was another reminder in this is, get back into the practice of that. Because I think like with all of these things, they're ultimately practices. So that's just a practical tool. And that came from actually a golf book that I read, Tour Mentality, by a guy, Nick O'Hearn, where he would play rounds of golf. And if you'd have a negative thought, you'd have matchsticks in his pockets and you'd move them from the left pocket to the right pocket. And then the goal would be is to go through a round of golf without having to move any of those matchsticks from a pocket. So another really cool tool to be like, to again, practice improving your thinking or mindset.
Love it. Which now brings us to the third agreement. And the third agreement is don't make assumptions. This is a really good one. I really like this one.
You like it? Well, you jump into it.
Well, let's go back to the example we used earlier. I made so many assumptions about what my wife was saying that morning when I got up and she said, oh my God, I'm so tired. I didn't sleep at all. I made so many assumptions there, whereas I could have asked questions to clarify and then not make assumptions. Because I made the assumption that, it's all about me. You're trying to make a dig at me. So I made that assumption, whereas I could have said, hey, are you saying that because you felt like I should have gotten up and looked after him? Because if I just asked that, she would no, I'm just kind of venting how I feel. So to me, that could have, I'm just tired. I'm just sleeping. Then if I asked that and she said that, I would have been like, I'm sorry, I've got to do this work thing. And then I could have said, hey, did you need me to cancel my meeting this morning so I can look after Xander so you can get a bit more sleep? All of a sudden, if I had the foresight and the wisdom to be able to ask more questions to clarify and had the courage to ask more questions to clarify in that moment, we could have avoided this whole weird morning where I felt really negative, she felt really negative, and then it's like, and that's why one of the things I love about what the author said is that heaven or hell, that's not places we go to when we die. Heaven or hell, you create that while you're alive. This world that you live in right now can be heaven or hell. You don't have to wait till you're dead. I love that. And I think one of the ways to make this life hell is to make a bunch of assumptions. Go ahead, take things personally, make a bunch of assumptions, and don't be impeccable with your word. Try that for a week and do that every 5 minutes and watch hell start to appear and demons start to take over your life. So to me, don't make assumptions. Again, this practice has already created so many powerful benefits this very 2 weeks that I've been able to apply this lesson.
For sure. I think the assumption one, especially with relationships and
so
relationships.
So powerful.
Super powerful. I even think back to Chantal and I, where you have periods where you know that you need to have conversations and you need to ask questions and you need to put stuff out there. But both people, you can just feel it. Like it's superficial level conversations, not the stuff that actually needs to be said, but no one can articulate it, or no one wants to take the risk of rocking the boat too much because it could explode or it could lead to uncomfortable or tough conversations. And then when you actually do have the conversation, it's so liberating and freeing. It's like, there's only like 2 things that we actually had to speak about, and now we can feel lighter and move on. And it's the same probably with employer-employee relationships, friendships, siblings, parents, where it's super easy just to, it goes back to the forgiveness component that you spoke about earlier, where we'll sometimes have 10, 20-year grudges when a 5-minute conversation could probably solve it and remove all of the weight that then comes from that. That was probably just another big takeaway that I took from this point is you might be assuming that that person doesn't want to speak to you wrongly, but they want closure. You might be assuming that your partner's angry at you, but maybe there's just something else going on that you can't really see and they need your support for it. Like, there's so many, I loved how you opened this bit where you said the key to this is asking questions.
It is.
Yeah. What type of questions?
Well, questions that will not cause you to make assumptions, so you can actually seek further clarity. Mm-hmm. I mean, it made me think of this, and you're so right when it comes to relationships, right? I mean, this is so applicable to marriages and friendships and any form of, like you said, intimate relationship. It just made me think of this. As a magician, right? The reason people fall for magic is because human beings make assumptions. When I take a coin and I put it into my hand and then I make the coin vanish, the reason you fall for it is because you made an assumption that the coin actually went in that hand. So it's human nature that we make assumptions. So as magicians, we understand that human beings make assumptions because if a lookalike went in there, it must have went in there. Therefore, when it disappears, amazing, right? Whereas we're able to fool. We're able to fool you. Thank you, Ollie. I had nothing in my hands, but you're such a great friend. But the reason
play my mind with your magic all the time.
It's not even magic.
I love how you didn't even start with a coin, but you still made it.
Oh god, you're such an idiot.
But like me.
Yeah, I think I have. But what I'm trying to get at here is that we fall for the illusions of magic because we make assumptions. And that's fun and that's great. But don't fall for the illusions that happen in life where you make so many assumptions about classic. I'll give another example. For so long, I thought my mom and dad weren't proud of me because I didn't have a degree. I didn't
they're not.
The Asian prophecy.
They told me that they actually said they're all in on your brother.
Yeah, how do you go from supportive, loving friend to just monster in moments? Yeah. No, I know they're not proud of me. I know. I was trying to just,
you haven't impersonated your dad in ages either. It's been at least.
I don't love you, boy. I don't love you. Yeah. Now let me bring it on when I feel inspired to. But the thing is, truthfully, they are proud of me because they told me. Okay. But I made the assumption that they weren't proud of me for the longest time because I made the assumption that they would only be proud of me if I had a degree. And I made the assumption that the only thing they cared about was the degree. But when I sat down and, sought the clarity and had a really deep and meaningful conversation and asked lots of questions and asked them, what life did you hope for me? And then they said, look, we genuinely did at a point hope that you would have a degree because we thought that was the only way to happiness. We thought that was the only way to success. But you've proven to us, you've opened our minds to help us see that there are so many different pathways to success. So not only are we proud of you, we are thankful to you for opening up our minds that before were closed. And to me, like that line healed my soul, Ali. But I didn't have that conversation with them until 4 years ago. So up until I was 30 years old, I had this idea in my mind. I created a hell. I was living within an illusion that my parents were not proud of me. But they said, no, we were proud of you the whole time. There were moments where we weren't proud because you did terrible things. But son, overall, we're so proud of you. And I wouldn't have received those words, or I wouldn't have received that spell, that wonderful spell, if I didn't ask questions to seek clarity. You know, and it's just, what illusions are you creating in your life because you're making a whole bunch of assumptions? And when you dispel those illusions, oh, it feels so good. It feels so good. You know, it's just, I mean, that's the example I wrote down is, sure, be amused with the illusions that magicians create, but don't fall for the damn toxic illusions you're creating in your own life. And just know that it's human nature that we fall victim to assumptions. We just do. We just do. Oh, if something looks that way, it must be that way. No, maybe it's not. Chances are it isn't.
It's true. It's true.
Do you have any other assumption examples? I mean, I'd love to hear an example from you where you made an assumption that has led you to creating, you know, you created this illusion as a result of that, and then you suffered.
No, I never assume anything. I just always ask questions.
No way. No way. No way. There's got to be.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Do you have an example?
I'm trying to think of one that's slightly different. I'll come back to that. I think just when you were saying this point around assumptions, I love the idea of questions and what questions to ask. And just one of the questions that I noted down when I was reading this part was just asking the other person, like, what is it that you want? Like, there's so much power in that line, right? In any interaction, especially if you think about really good relationships, generally there's lots of acceptance, there's lots of alignment, there's lots of exchange of value or mutual exchange of value. And the relationship usually gets a little bit murky when some of those conditions aren't met. It's like, oh yeah, now I'm not feeling that exchange of value. The interactions are getting a little bit more negative. It's rather than this being something that energizes us, it actually depletes energy from it. And I think that asking the question of what is it that you want, or what is it that we want from this, has got a lot of power. And that's something that I try to implement even in the work world. You know, when with staff nowadays, it's like, all right, well, we've just done strategic planning. So then it's time to sit down and be like, all right, well, are we aligned? Are you clear? What is it that you want? I think they become really powerful and important questions there. And going back to your original question, like that's maybe an example to use is it's so easy in a relationship to just assume things. It's like, oh, that person will want more of this. That person will want more reward. This person will want this. Whereas if you don't ask, it's really hard to get clarity on it.
Here's an analogy that I would use to make this, I think, very easy to digest. And the analogy is, think of it as a present that you're about to give someone. Before you give someone a present, do the due diligence and make sure they like the present. There's nothing worse than buying someone something and they're like, oh, yay. Yeah, I really wanted this. Thanks. You know, and that does happen. It's inevitable. So to me, be a great person, be someone who's a great present giver. Yeah. For example, I'll give you an example.
Remember when I bought you that s'mores box?
Yes, you did.
S'mores in it.
Ali heard I was getting into camping, And then he got me this s'mores box, and you open it and there's nothing inside. It's just a box to put s'mores in. And you could have at least got me the bloody s'mores ingredients.
I thought they were included.
No, they weren't included. It specifically said on the box in massive letters, s'mores and biscuits and chocolates not included.
I'm not made of money, all right? You can buy your own s'mores. At least you got a box.
Not very thoughtful. Terrible idea. Terrible idea. Terrible idea.
I want that gift back.
I threw it in the bin. Another example is, I'll give you an example, right? Yesterday, I remember I finished all of my work early. It was about 4 p.m. and then I had about an hour and a half to spare. So instead of me just doing things that I thought my wife would have wanted me to do to contribute to the household and help around the house, I kind of said to her, I said, hey, there's a bunch of things I can do. I could mow the lawn. I could go look after Xander while you cook. I could do another load of wash. Hey, what would you like me to do in this time? How can I use this time best to serve our family? And whereas normally I would just go, I'd go mow the lawn. And I remember once I mowed the lawn and she goes, oh my God, why do you have to mow the lawn now? Can't you see I'm cooking food? You know, and then I'd be out there mowing the lawn, listening to a podcast all like, I'm a great man. I'm a great father and husband, right? And then went in, and then I wasn't all of a sudden, and then, you know, it gave us a terrible moment together. So to me, the moment I asked that, she was like, oh, hey, look, I don't actually need you to do much right now. I'm okay cooking. Hey, why don't you, I know you really wanted to put in an exercise session. Why don't you go exercise? So it was amazing because it was like a reverse gift. I thought I was about to give her a gift, and because I asked the question, I got a gift in return, and I was like, winner. And it felt great, dude. I was like, this is amazing. I've never received a reverse gift like that. And it was it's a reverse gift. It really was. But that was so cool because in not making an assumption, in asking questions to clarify, in trying to be helpful in serving my family, I got a reward out of that. It was bloody awesome. It was like the best form of positive reinforcement ever. But it just goes to show again, in seeking clarity, others appreciate that so much that sometimes they're going to reverse it and reward you in the end. So like, to me, that was just such a great example of me applying this and immediately benefiting.
Love that.
Reverse gift.
Very cool.
Very cool.
The reverse gift. It's true though. How often does that happen?
That's never happened in my relationship, man. That was amazing. I was so, I was like, oh, I love her so much.
It's like the power of reciprocity, right? Like
Yeah.
you do something, you put something out there with the intention to give and you get it back in an unexpected way. That's a really cool example.
Yeah, I've got so many examples I can do this. I'm going to throw one more in just for the sake of it.
Okay.
At night, sorry, this is just a show about Vin and his examples. But at night, Xander sleeps in his own room and he wakes up in the middle of the night. And then what happens is, before this, we made assumptions where I assumed that Pei Wen knew that I got to get up early. So I'm like, oh, she'll get up for Xander. And then she doesn't get up and I didn't get up. And then when she ends up getting up, I can hear her begrudgingly get up. I'm like, oh, Whereas now we make no more assumptions. Now it's, hey, I've got an early morning start tomorrow. Do you mind getting up, helping him if he gets up from bed? Yep, cool, no worries. Argument's gone. Cool. And then she says, hey, I'm feeling a bit tired. Do you mind getting up tonight? Now we just take turns. We just alternate. And no more assumptions.
That's awesome.
Stop it with the assumptions, everyone. It will be amazing for you. And I'm going to try to stop making assumptions myself.
Love it.
Brilliant. All right. Well, that brings us into the final and fourth agreement, which is always do your best. Over to you.
Oh, always do your best. Should I just go with the same line as the last one? I think the sentence is pretty self-explanatory.
Thanks for joining the Vin and Ali podcast. That's the end of the episode.
We just start reading out the book line by line.
Oh, gosh. I mean, well, here's the thing, Ali. I mean, the reason I like talking about these lessons is that it just helps further embed them. You know, and then it shows that you don't have to take these lessons and apply it into some crazy situation. Like, my goodness, don't make assumptions. I use that to fix a 0.1% situation in my life about who's getting up to go to our son's room to comfort him, right? It's like, man, far out. It applies everywhere. It's amazing. It
does.
But anyway, awesome. Always do your best.
To me, always do your best. I really found the underlying theme here around taking action and having strong intent with your action. I think it's also around being kind to yourself too, and knowing that no matter what it is, whether you decide to choose to practice some of these agreements or not, or you've got other beliefs that you want to change or tools that you want to use. The big one here was just around do your best, put it all out there, but then don't punish yourself about it. Like even the past, like I think even when I look at this podcast and what we're doing here, we may have acted in certain ways previously, but today's today. It's a new day. Tomorrow is moving forward. Like don't hold on to what's happened previously and then punish yourself for those actions. Like all you can do is learn something new, be open to learning that, and then try to implement it and take action on it. And that's what I really got out of this point, is that it really collects all of the other lessons and then it links to them. So it's like, look, all you can do is say if you're really focusing on number one, which is being impeccable with your word, you might not get it perfect every time. Do your best. Like at the end of the day, if you can look yourself in the mirror and say that, well, I tried my best at being impeccable with my word. I tried my best at not taking things personally. You know, maybe you improve by 1% every single day. I tried my best at not making assumptions or judging people or just coming to a conclusion. And then we always go back to this, is I think that when you do your best, like try to track it in some way or form. If you're trying to change your behavior or change an approach, the power there is really in tracking it or using some sort of tool to see, all right, am I actually progressing in this space or not? And I think that was just one of the things that I got out of this point. It's more around embedding the habit. It's about commitment. It's about taking action.
Well, that's a really cool perspective. I mean, I can see that more now that you described it in that way. Whereas what's interesting is when I read it, I got a completely almost different point out of it. Because the point that I really extracted from it was it made me treat myself more in a more kind way. And it helped me put on that kind lens and view those around me, because it makes me look at everyone as everyone's trying their best right now, including myself. And then it kind of painted me a picture that as human beings, we all live on a continuum, right? And we're not always at our best. I mean, far out, no one's there. That's not real. And I think sometimes on social media, some people can pretend to always be at the best, always be at their most beautiful. And it's easy to do that because you're showing people snapshots of your life. Whereas when you look at life in actuality, it's a continuum. You know, I love that when the author said, you wake up that morning, you may feel great in the morning because you had a cup of coffee, but then you had a really heavy meal. And then your best when you have a very heavy meal and you had a lot of carbs and you're having like brain fog, your best there isn't going to be as good as it was before when you just had a coffee on an empty stomach in the morning, right? And it's just that throughout the day, your best varies and it exists on this continuum. So it just made me more kind to myself in the sense that if I'm not doing something to the best of my ability compared to the morning, it's okay. Just do your best in the moment with what you can, with what the resources you've been given, for example. And as long as you can say that though, and as long as you do this as often as you can, that's great. And then those around you, maybe they did a bad day. Maybe they didn't have the best day. That's okay. Maybe that was their best for that day. So all of a sudden, it just gave me a much kinder lens to look at the people around me, as opposed to going, you did the best. I saw the best work out of you last week on a Tuesday, and then I compared that to this Tuesday, and it's not as good. It just allows me to be more empathetic. You know, everyone exists on a continuum. I do, you do, we all do. You can't be perfect. It's not real. Moment. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, very cliche and overused term, but again, and even as you were saying that, so much about this book is around awareness and reflection.
It is.
Right? And maybe acceptance as well. That I really love what you said there, that your best will change.
Yeah.
And
that's a very good way of putting it. Yeah.
And we're so fixated that, I think a lot of the times we want to relive our best and we hold on to it. It's like, how do I get back into that zone? How do I get back into that mindset? How do I get my energy back to that level? How do I get back to 2013 when I was really productive, or whatever it is? And we hold on to these little instances where, there's something very cool in that line that,
well,
your best can change. And I love how you use the graph analogy.
The continuum, the sine wave, right? Here's the thing, right? You just made me realize something really cool. Your best also changes. Your best also changes. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you another example. Yeah. I'm sorry to use so many examples for my relationship.
At least have 5 more examples by the end.
Okay, sure. No worries. I will gladly do that. No, but I remember one time I was watching this kind of rom-com with my wife, and we were watching this rom-com, and you see, when you're first courting someone you like, you do all these sweet things for them. And I remember her kind of saying, oh, why don't we do that anymore? And it's the whole, as men, sometimes as we get older, we become a little bit less romantic. But I say to her, I remember thinking, and I said this to her, I said, why do we have to go back? And I think you said this to me once too. Why do we have to chase what we once had? Why do we have to go back to what it was in the beginning? Why don't we evolve to what it can be in the future? Why not? Because like, to me, a relationship has different stages. Why are we trying to go back to the honeymoon period? Why does it have to look like that? Why can't it look like something different? And the reason I'm bringing this up is simply because the best can change as well. The best doesn't have to be just compared to what it once was as the best. The best can evolve into something completely different. So your best today may be, sure, putting in 16 hours of work, but your best in the future may be 4 hours of work. And that's considered to be the best because now the best has changed. So don't be so rigid with what the best is and doing your best actually is, because allow the best to change, move, and morph and change into a different thing. Sure. It's like I said to my wife, why does it just have to be date nights? Why can't it be once in a lifetime experiences? Why can't it be something that's different? We don't have to go back to the cliche, let's have a date and then I rock up with flowers and, why does it have to be that? It should be something else, Yep.
Yeah, everything evolves, everything changes. It's new. I think that's also a very hard thing for us to adapt to, because we have preferences, we like things, we get used to things, and there is a level of discomfort when things change. It's just part of it. So it's very natural to then want to hold on to a time or a memory. And it's funny even how those memories change. Like, you can look back on a trip 6 years ago and the story that you paint about that trip can be so vivid. Like, going to Rome that time, that was the best thing ever. But then you can dig deeper into it. It's like, oh, well, actually, no, I remember it now more clearly. Like, I actually missed home. We got food poisoning. We missed a flight. Like, there was all these other bits that happened. But it's so hilarious how in hindsight we can paint this picture.
Selective memory.
We've spoken about in a lot of the episodes. It's the power of journaling too. When you then look back over those journals over a long period of time, if you can get to that point where you can actually then see the reality versus what was in the camera roll. If you're very open with your journaling practice, and then you can be like, that's actually what I was thinking and feeling. Then you can decide, okay, is there bits there that I actually do want to try to emulate again or practice a little bit more?
I feel like
approach.
I feel like the only way to live out these 4 agreements consistently is to journal, because in order to live out these agreements, you need to review whether you're living out these agreements. And I just feel like when you journal, you're looking into a mirror, and if you don't look into a mirror at all, you have no idea how you look. You have no idea how you're living. You just are oblivious. And it's like going out into the ocean without a compass. I feel like journaling is the mirror, but journaling can also be a compass to help you navigate, to help you see where you're actually going, and to help you course correct to go where you actually want to go to. And to me, again, I know we talk about this a lot, but again, it's just been such a huge game changer for me, journaling, just to allow me to reflect. Am I doing my best today? Have I made assumptions? Have I taken something personally today that I shouldn't have taken personally? And have I cast good spells to those around me and made them laugh and made them feel good and made them feel empowered? Have I done those things? You know, and it's a cool thing now for me to be able to check. I love checking with myself these 4 little agreements each day. Just, you know, in my consciousness, it's there now. Maybe it'll fade later, but for now, I just keep checking those things.
I think it comes back to the core principles of accounting, right? Like how like the ledger. It's a funny theme that's sort of sprung up in this episode. Like I hate finance and I hate accounting.
Yeah, me too.
Actually, that's a bit harsh. I don't hate it actually, but it's got so much. When you do it properly, it paints the truest picture, right? Like you can sit there, and it's probably the reason why we use it in the business world, because anyone can spin a story, but the numbers generally tell the truth. Whereas in our personal lives, we very rarely account for things. Whether it's hours spent, whether it's how we spend
the food you eat,
energy, thoughts, intentions, right? So I think that's where journaling nearly becomes your way of accounting, or using, like I use a tool called Asana, which helps me account. I use Evernote to take notes down in. Like there's all these little tools that we can use these days that then can help us to track, to review, to continuously write our story, to learn, to reflect. But I think there's some power there in accounting and being accountable to yourself, because then you can really reflect and then find more truths. You don't find them all, but it's just another way to be like, all right, well, am I bullshitting myself here, or is that legit? Is this something that needs improvement, or is it okay? Am I missing something? What do I need to color in? Is there a belief that I've got that's not helping me? Do I need to change it? Is there a value that I've got that I'm not really aligned with anymore? Do I need to change it or realign with it? Like, gives you another form of self-managed direction nearly.
Oh, I love it, brother. I mean, I look at this book, for me, this is kind of my conclusion from it. And it's that I now have 4 extra tools to allow me to create heaven on earth. I can create a heaven environment in my home, within my family, within my circle of friends, within those I work with, within my community. And I have 4 extra very powerful tools that allows me to, again, cast wonderful spells and make those feel good. It allows me to also have a shield to protect me from potential harsh things or demons trying to enter my heaven. It allows me to not make assumptions with what those around me need. It allows me to be more clear and actually be of service to those around me in the way they want me to be of service. And it is a reminder for me to continually do the best that I can, but also be kind to myself. And, you know, with these 4 extra tools, Ali, I really feel like I can create a more heaven-like life, a more heaven-like dream, you know, a more heaven-like simulation. It just allows me to make the most of this time while I'm here and enjoy more of it while I'm here, as opposed to, again, very easily, if I didn't have these tools or I use them in the wrong way. And again, I just want to burn this into the minds of everyone. But if I started to cast terrible curses on the people around me, and I took everything that people said around me personally, and I made a bunch of assumptions on what I can do for other people, and then I never do my best, then damn, that's a terrible simulation to be in. That's a terrible reality to live in. And then that's what I would end with. And how about you?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting book. It's good. It's because it's a short read for starters, so very
2 hours,
very efficient, nice and small. But I think that it does provide a framework for internal freedom. If say freedom's a value of yours, you might find something here. If you don't feel free, or you feel weighed down, or there's potentially something in this book that you'll be able to take away that might unlock in terms of getting a little bit more freedom and fluidity. And there was just another line that probably aligns to that I really noted down, is just around going back to the concept of energy. It's like as a toolkit, a little thing that I'll be looking back on a little bit more is, all right, is what I'm doing, is it energizing somebody else, or is it sucking energy away from them? Is it filling them with energy, or is it removing it? And also being a little bit more aware around even the people that I surround myself with. Are they filling me with energy, or are they depleting it? And that's just another nice, I always love trying to find practical applications out of these things, even though this one goes into the realm of philosophy and spirituality a little bit more, but I think it's got some really cool practical applications too.
Wow. That's awesome, brother. Thanks for your summation as well. And thanks everyone for joining us. And I guess in closing, please do subscribe to our podcast as I cast one last spell on all of you. You're beautiful, you're enough, and you're amazing. See you in the next episode. Bye.